Hello and welcome to this roundtable on Argentina's oil and gas boom, hosted by Asia Pacific Economics. My name is David Austin, and I'm joined today by Nick Duncan, Chief Oil and Gas Advisor for Asia Pacific Economics. Nick has had a long career in the global oil and gas industry, including as a consultant geologist to many oil companies ranging from small independents to majors and national oil companies across the Asian and Australasian regions. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Thank you, David. That's great. Thank you very much.
Nick, for those of us who may be unfamiliar, can you please introduce us to some of the Spanish place names that you'll be discussing? And maybe you can tell us, what does a dead cow have to do with oil and gas exploration?
Yeah, that's it's a great point. And yeah, there are really two key Spanish names that I'll be referring to quite a bit during this discussion. The first one is the Neuquén Basin, and this is the geological basin in central western Argentina, where these oil and gas deposits are. So that's a critical piece. And the other word that I'll be referring to a lot is Vaca Muerta, which translates to dead cow. It is the geological name of the formation from which this conventional production comes from, unconventional shales they are. Quite why it's called the dead cow, I really don't know. But anyway, so listen out, it'll be referred to as the Vaca Muerta.
What has been driving the significant surge in oil and gas production in Argentina over the last few years?
Yeah, interestingly, it's a very simple answer. It's unconventional shale oil and gas from the Neuquén Basin. But let me explain with a bit more detail. Argentina's long been producing oil and gas, and its conventional oil production has been in steady decline from around 750,000 barrels a day in 2000 to less than 260,000 barrels a day today. However, from 2021, unconventional oil production has been seen to be increasing exponentially and now represents 71% of today's total of over 890,000 barrels a day. Quite a significant increase. And it's a similar story with gas. From 2004, this was declining from about 4.8 billion cubic feet a day to less than 1.8 billion cubic feet today. However, unconventional gas production from 2015 has risen steadily and represents something like 74% of today's 5.5 billion cubic feet of production. So really, it's made significant changes. Considerable investments have been made to reach these production levels. An energy consultancy, Wood Mackenzie, estimates that the combined upstream investment in 2025 was $10 billion. And they believe it's going to be increasing going forwards, ending up averaging between $15 to $16 billion annually beyond 2030. So some considerable amount there on the upstream side. They're also saying that there will be another $5 billion a year spent on LNG export terminals and pipelines. So as you can imagine, this is quite some considerable investment. And just looking at the national oil company, YPF, they recently announced plans to invest $25 billion of their own money over the next 10 years developing the Vaca Muerta production and export capacity. So, yeah, a not inconsiderable amount. The Neuquén Basin is located in central western Argentina, and it has been producing conventional oil and gas from 1918. However, the unconventional shale-derived oil and gas really only began in 2011 from the Vaca Muerta formation. And this is the thing that's been driving the growth as development's been ongoing. Production has been increasing significantly. For those listening who may be familiar with the shale oil and gas from the US, it is quite similar to the Midland, Texas discoveries and production. Similar drilling and production techniques were adopted in Argentina and have been refined for the local hydrocarbon areas. And well productivity is now well on par with many in the US. So it's quite significant, and it looks like it's going to be really important for the future.
But is it fair to say that there's been a more recent surge, or has it kind of been gradually increasing since then?
It's a good question, and the Vaca Muerta has followed a typical path seen in new onshore unconventional field developments. These usually start with low production that builds up steadily as techniques are refined, and from then on, significant increases are often seen. This is very much due to the type of exploration. The unconventional drilling methods involve complex horizontal wells, multiple wells into the reservoir, which are then highly fractured to produce hydrocarbons from the shale formation. This is very, as I said, very reflective in the Vaca Muerta. If we look at the early gas production, came from around 2013, which increased significantly from 2015 to the 5.5 billion cubic feet we see today in 2025. For oil, similar, early production began around about 2015. This increased strongly up to 2020, and after a minor decline below 500,000 barrels a day, since 2021, it's grown exponentially, and the energy minister has said it's planned to reach at least 1 million barrels a day by the end of the year, so some considerable improvement. This growth in oil production has had a real positive effect on oil exports, which in 2024 generated $5.26 billion for the Argentine economy. And recent figures from January to May this year say that it's generated around $3.77 billion, an increase of over 54% from the previous year, a really significant increase there. Interestingly, partly that will be due to the additional production, and also because obviously the oil price has risen this half of the year thanks to the Gulf crisis. So that will also have had a major effect too.
Are both domestic and international companies contributing to the success in the Neuquén Basin?
Yeah, I mean, although recently in the last couple of years we've seen Exxon, Petronas, and Equinor exiting the area, their equity has been taken by local companies. And so today, the main operators really are YPF, which is the Argentinian national oil company, Vista, Pampa Energia, Plus Petrol, and Pan American Energy. And there's still one major left, which is Chevron. It doesn't sound so great. However, this year has seen a recent resurgence in foreign company interest. Continental, the US shale specialist, took 4 new license blocks early in 2026, and currently ENI and XRG are awaiting approval on 3 license blocks in the basin, where they will partner with YPF. Gas from there will go into a major LNG project that's planned for the future. So things are changing, and I think if we look at President Milei's administration, he actively encourages oil and gas exploration. And so what they've been doing is they've rolled out various incentives and are in the process of creating a new legal structure to allay investors' concerns. Probably the main incentive is the RIGI framework, RIGI, which is designed to attract long-term capital-intensive investments across various strategic sectors, providing 30 years of stability for tax, customs, and foreign exchange, alongside significant fiscal reductions. This was launched in August 2024 for pipeline infrastructure projects, and in February 26 was expanded to include upstream projects greater than value of $600 million. So this is a really positive thing for the industry because one of the challenges is political risk. Argentina doesn't have a great history of political stability. President Milei obviously coming in with very different views on how things should be. So they recognize that they need to provide long-term stability for these projects, which are going to be very expensive. And so companies will be attracted. One other thing that's ongoing right now, in January 26th, they announced a new licensing round for the Neuquén Basin, where 15 E&P blocks are up for bid. My sense is there will be strong interest, obviously because the Vaca Muerta shales are really prolific, and apparently the blocks are over oil plays, so this really bodes well. So I'm expecting to see by the end of this year, when the results are announced, certainly we will see a few more foreign companies coming in to help exploit the resources in the basin.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you mentioned was it the RIGI?
Yes, that's correct.
Which is one of the ways that they're looking ahead and planning the expected growth in oil and gas production. Are there other actions that Argentina is taking to kind of manage this in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the RIGI one, because it looks at all sectors, it is providing tax stability, customs protection, foreign exchange stability, and also some fiscal reductions. What effectively that does is it basically brings the Argentinian oil and gas sector into focus for a lot of companies, because obviously all the oil companies, the foreign companies, they want to make money, and they would have a huge capital expense before they can actually recoup any money.
Mm-hmm.
So you really this RIGI framework is perhaps the sort of the first major step to moving forwards. I mean, I don't know the exact terms that have been requested during the licensing round, but I would imagine again it's very competitive with other opportunities globally. So I think we'll see some interesting bids from foreign companies who are really keen to get in there and be successful. Because one thing is for sure is the Vaca Muerta contains a lot of oil and gas, is highly productive with the right conditions. And so, there's not too much of a risk there for the companies.
Do you have any other predictions about, what does the future hold for oil and gas business in Argentina?
One of the things I'd just like to touch on is really about how Argentina is going to be managing the expected growth in oil and gas production, because that, of course, it's all very well finding all this oil and gas, but you have to get it to the markets. And this is one of the things that Argentina is recognized as being significantly important. And the RIGI framework has really helped attract a lot of money to fund these things. There's a flagship project nearing completion right now, the Vaca Muerta Sur oil pipeline, led by YPF with a couple of international partners. This huge pipeline is to take oil from the Vaca Muerta oil fields 437 kilometers to a new terminal on Punta Colorado on the Atlantic coast. The project is estimated to cost like $2.5–3 million. And this is actually due to commence at the end of this year, with initial production of around 180,000 barrels a day, and will ramp up through 2027 to something like 550,000 barrels a day. So again, this is really, really critical to people looking to explore there, because they need to know that there's a pipeline to get the oil out. So that's one key project. There are also some smaller projects in the oil side, Vaca Muerta Norte, and also with expansion of existing oil pipelines. The estimation is that the export capacity could grow to over 900,000 barrels a day in the near future. So that's really positive. And then, of course, because the production is both oil and gas, there are two significant gas projects ongoing. The Southern Energy Consortium has gas pipelines and a floating LNG export terminals being built right now. They're expected to commence in sometime later in 2027, and then there will be a phase two the following year to build on that. And then the Argentina LNG project, led by YPF, ENI, and XRG, as I mentioned earlier, they're awaiting approval to get a license for their blocks, but essentially their plan is to build an FLNG, floating LNG export terminals, and commence production in the early 2030s. So those are the two really key things that are making a difference to companies coming in, knowing that the infrastructure will be there to get their hydrocarbons to market. But then kind of backpedaling, if I may, on the question that you asked on the future, the future does look very positive at the moment. It's great. The amazing thing is the Vaca Muerta estimates for recoverable reserves are 16 billion barrels of oil, which makes it the fourth largest shale deposit in the world, and 308 trillion cubic feet of gas, which is the second largest shale deposit in the world. So that's tremendous. That basically means there's lots of opportunity to get this out of the ground, and the success will be over a longer term. The deputy energy minister in mid-April was speaking at a conference, and he said that oil production is on track to exceed 1 million barrels a day this year. As I said, currently we're about 890,000 barrels a day. And he also stated that their production target is to surpass 1.4 million barrels a day by 2030. These are quite bullish figures, but the energy consultancy Wood Mackenzie also sees similar growth. They're saying they should be steady increase in oil production to a total that could exceed 1.6 million barrels a day by 2035. So you can see that there's lots of plans of things growing significantly. And looking on the gas side, at the moment, Argentina does not export any gas. However, with the ongoing Southern Energy LNG project, the country will be an LNG exporter for the first time in late 2027. And this, as I mentioned on the project, is going to have a phase two. So it'll be significantly increasing volumes as that gets larger. Plus, with the Argentina LNG mega project being in the early 2030s, that also will add to the LNG. So it could well be by sort of mid-2030s, Argentina is actually a significant LNG exporter. My only caveat to this sort of very, very positive outlook is political stability. It's so critical that the country maintains political stability so that companies are comfortable there investing in what are extremely costly projects. It looks like the framework that President Milei's put in is going to do that. So overall, it should be a very bright future for the next 10, 15 years.
Thank you for that very comprehensive overview of Argentina's oil and gas boom. I'll just mention that Asia Pacific Economics CEO Rajiv Biswas has some insight into President Milei's policies that he'll be coming out with soon to kind of complement this podcast. But with that, thank you, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you, David.